Hi, welcome to Barination, where we support the bariatric community with humor, humility, and honesty.
You've just tuned into a podcast that welcomes you into a community, a resource center, and a safe place that powers your journey towards personal wellness.
Our goal is you leave us today feeling hopeful, inspired, and ready to live your best bariatric life.
Hey, Barination, it's April. I'm 43 years old, and even though I have a loving husband, I often buy myself gifts during the holiday season because I want to make sure that I am getting what I truly need, want, and appreciate. That's why I have a membership in the Barination support community. Some of my favorite events happen each and every week. Laura Grabo leads a general support group every Tuesday afternoon. Monique Coleman hosts fun Friday chats that are a great way to kick off my weekend. And I love popping into all of the nutritional supports that happen every month. Kayla Girgen, Jeannie Boyer, and Andrea Luongo host nutritional Q&As and classes that get me information exactly when and where I need it. The Barination support community has truly been the game changer in my journey. And this holiday season, you can give yourself that same support. Join us in the community at barination.mn.co. I hope I see you in the nation soon. Hi, Barination. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I am meeting with one of our favorite dietitians, Miss Kayla Girgen, to talk about a subject that we often have questions about. In the Barination membership community, one of our members asked this really awesome question, and I instantly was like, okay, I need to ask Kayla about this. One of our members is about 5 or 6 months post-op from R&Y and noticed that they can very easily consume potato chips. But then when they go to eat a potato, they have a very different response from their body. So, Kayla, the question I have for you today is, what is a slider food and why are they easier to consume than whole foods?
Yes. Where to start with this one? I feel like we could take like a few different avenues. So maybe we can kind of touch on and then see which road you want to go down.
I love it.
I will say, like, when it comes to like potato chips versus potato, like a big part comes to like processing. But I think just to take a step back, like slider foods, oftentimes I like to think of those as an example. Like, say a slider food is something you put on your tongue, you do zero chewing, you come back, say 30 minutes later and it's dissolved. So think of like crackers, chips, like candies, things like that. On the other hand, you have like non-slider foods, which tend to be like more fibrous, more whole foods. So think of like a hunk of potato. Put that on your tongue. You come back 30 minutes later. Maybe it's still there. Maybe it's not. A broccoli is like another example, or a piece of chicken. Like, you've got to do some like chewing to get that down, right? So those tend to stick with you a lot longer. A lot of folks might have seen like if you've ever seen the funnel and here's your stomach after, bariatric surgery and everything's getting washed through. I don't always love those because I think that depending on your surgery, like the anatomy's not always the same, comparing things like sleeve versus Roux-en-Y. But something like a slider food tends to go through a lot faster. It digests very quickly. So I think when we look at the impact on things like hunger hormones, that's kind of one of the avenues that it can really impact. But then on the other hand, things like slider foods can impact your blood sugar, and you end up on this like blood sugar roller coaster all day too, if you're not pairing it with certain things. So I would say we've got hormones, we've got blood sugar, and then we've got like maybe habits would be like another thing too. So some of those like sneaky habits creeping back after surgery. So a few different avenues we can meander down.
I'm intrigued by all three, of course. So this really, truly might be a much longer conversation that we need to have. The thing that immediately popped into my head that I'm going to need you to answer before we do go down one of those paths. So what is a protein shake then? Is that a slider food? Because all of a sudden when you said that, I was like, wait a minute, could that be considered a slider food?
I would say yes. I'm probably going to get so much hate for this. But I think of like fluids, like a lot of the fluids, if you compare fluids versus something solid, I would almost say protein shake probably falls in that fluid category, just because those fluids pass through your stomach so much faster versus something solid where you actually like need some chewing, some digestion.
Yes.
There. So,
and I don't mean to ask that question to get hate, but I guess what just clicked in my brain when you were talking about blood sugar and hunger and all these other kind of things, right? These these package items that we as bariatric patients rely on. So not saying that this is bad or good. I'm just saying I know as a 5-year post-op patient, I rely on liquid protein every morning in the form of Profi, right? So that is a liquid protein. The protein that I choose is high quality. I make sure that it's a complete protein source and right, it has vitamin and nutrients that are added into it. But I understand this now. Yeah, my body's not doing a lot of work to process that protein. It's using it and it is moving through, right?
mm-hmm. And I would say like protein shakes are amazing. I think it's really hard to reach some of those, like your protein goals without them. So I think they're wildly helpful. I just think maybe in the case, like say if somebody is doing something like a protein shake for breakfast and hungry 30 minutes later, then that might be, you know, an opportunity where you can do something maybe like eggs or even something paired up with that protein shake just so you have a little bit of substance.
And that was exactly where I was going, right? Is when I think about this, yeah, I'm having a protein shake, not necessarily because I want to hit caloric goals or because I know it's going to help me feel full. It's not, it doesn't help me feel full, but what it is doing is it's helping me hit that protein goal that I know I need to do. So I usually start my day with Profi, and then I'll move to a whole food breakfast, like eggs, like granola, cottage cheese, right? Whatever feels in the moment. So I'm definitely combining it with those things. And I think it's important to know that when you consume these foods, you do want to pay attention to what your hunger is telling you 30 minutes to an hour afterwards. And that has to do with blood sugar and hormones, right? And just what your body's doing.
Exactly. I will say one thing, like one tip on the protein shake too, especially if that's like your thing in the morning. I think again, it can be really, really helpful because we need an annoying amount of protein. And sometimes it can be really hard to meet your requirements when your volume's restricted. But I would say too, even having your protein shake within, say, like a 30-minute window, like treating it like a meal. So if you're, you know, maybe combining it again, like doing Profi, and you notice like, okay, well, I'm sipping on my Profi for 2 or 3 hours. Like that's not going to be the same effect as, say, having a protein shake in 30 minutes where you're getting that, you know, big load of protein all at once, almost like you would a meal. So that can be something to experiment with is timing.
Okay. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I know too, from my personal experience and from this member's question, the desire to consume slider foods can be grounded in habit, and it can be grounded in they just taste good, right? And a lot of slider foods are engineered to really taste exceptionally better than those whole food options, right? So are there things that we can do? Like, it's not that a potato chip is bad, right? But are there things that we can do to maybe make that potato chip a little bit more worth its bang for its buck along our bariatric journey?
Yes, certainly. I think one of the biggest things I teach is like cushioning your carbs. So when we think about things like potato chips, like not having those things alone can really help. I think volume wise, so you're not just filling up on something that's going to pass through really quickly. And I think that in itself, if you're having just, you know, highly processed carbs, those pass through really quickly, then you find yourself hungry shortly after eating and you get into this grazing pattern, which we know can lead to weight regain after surgery. And then pairing that with something can make a wild difference, I would say, just in how satisfied you feel, but then also your blood sugar levels too. So just pairing up, say, a potato chips with a string cheese or some cottage cheese. I see like a lot of times like people doing the protein chips with like dipping it in cottage cheese. So that could be an alternative too.
Or what is the connection then between these slider foods, our gut hormones, and blood sugar? Or, I mean, are they all connected?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. I feel like everything's kind of interconnected, playing with like maybe starting with the hormones. So after surgery, one of the main hunger hormones, we have ghrelin. So I like to think of ghrelin as like grr, like your stomach's growling. Because on the other end of the spectrum, we've got leptin. And that's something that tells you that you're not hungry. So I like to think like grr, like growling, ghrelin. That's what makes you hungry. So if that's how I remember it, if that helps.
Oh my God. Genius.
Yeah.
Yep. Never heard that before, but now I cannot unforget that. Thank you.
So basically after surgery, so whether you've had like gastric sleeve or maybe gastric bypass, like a large portion of your stomach is removed or, maybe cut away in the case of like gastric bypass. And that's where a lot of the ghrelin is made. So like 90% of the ghrelin is made in your stomach. So naturally you remove some of that, your hunger hormones tend to come down. So you have that advantage, that metabolic advantage with bariatric surgery. And that's why I think some people like after surgery, they're like, I have zero appetite. This is so weird. I have to eat on a schedule because I forget to eat. So that's one advantage. And what activates ghrelin, so kind of, again, stepping back, you've got less ghrelin after bariatric surgery, but the thing that really shuts ghrelin off or, sends those hunger signals packing, I should say, is nutrient density. So like how many nutrients are coming in with those foods. So if you think again, the example of like potato chip, probably not a whole lot there versus like actual potato. Or, even getting into some more of those like complex carbs or vegetables, you've got a lot of nutrients packed in a small volume. And I would say volume is another factor too. So even though you've had bariatric surgery, I think volume can be something that you can leverage to your advantage because I often see people like maybe purposely undereat, like thinking they have to feel hungry to see progress, when in fact adding a little bit more volume at once can help because I'll say the scary word, the stretch word, the S word. When you get a little bit of a gentle stretch on your stomach, even after surgery, that's really what shuts ghrelin off and tells your brain that you're full. So I think volume can play a big, big role in that. So again, thinking about like protein number one, but then filling up with like some good fiber, you get a lot of volume, you get a gentle stretch, which again kind of shuts that ghrelin down.
Oh, okay. I'm sitting here and I'm visualizing, right, what you're talking about. And I can see now where that introduction of the slider food is really triggering that hunger hormone, that ghrelin to come back because the nutrients have been stripped out of that item. So while it tastes good, right, and we have a desire to eat that, it's moving through our system and our body's response is, hey, I'm hungry. You need to eat more. And I just know personally before surgery and even sometimes after surgery, although it's not the same at all, I would eat some food, be full. And then a few minutes later, 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, I'm hungry again. Well, that spiked my anxiety and my worry and my panic. And I would get into this cycle of why can I not get full? Why am I always hungry? And if I'm returning to a less nutrient dense food, I'm just going to be repeating this over and over and over again, all the while me really starting to freak out now about why I can't ever seem to not be hungry.
Right. And the volume factor too, a lot of the slider foods, I mean, it's just, they're not, one, nutrient dense, but that's why you can put down like, a whole package of chips or crackers or things like that really digest and you don't get that volume, which can be scary. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah. Because that expansion is also triggering the hormone, right? That you're not hungry. So if you're not getting that expansion too, then you're really getting, it's like a double
whammy. Right. Yeah. And you had mentioned anxiety too. So like that increasing anxiety, that can be, it's probably a little bit of a, mental freak out going, oh my gosh, I just ate this. Look at this volume. I'm undoing all this hard work. I don't want to screw this up. But then I think too, anxiety can be a result of a blood sugar crash too. So with a lot of those highly processed carbs, you get a big spike. And then on that crash on the way down, that can induce like anxiety. It can make you hungry shortly after eating.
Yeah.
You get maybe like reactive hypoglycemia we see sometimes, especially with cases like gastric bypass too, where things, just your anatomy is set up where you're absorbing things so much faster.
Oh my God. So it's really like a triple, quadruple with this. Wow. This is like, yes. Okay. I feel like we're commentating the ice skating Olympics, a quad Lutz that absolutely crashed and burned. Oh my gosh. So it's a bit of a catch-22. And I guess I'm just thinking of so many products that I know that are out there, right? That I have purchased them because they're high in protein, right? I can have a protein chip and it's 20 grams of protein. So I'm absolutely hitting, my protein goals. But I guess what I'm really starting to understand from this conversation is I need to go beyond asking myself about those protein goals. And I really need to start having a conversation about what is this going to do to my hormones? What is this going to do to my physical stomach? Am I going to get the benefits of eating something else that has 20 grams of protein, like chicken, fish, tofu, I don't know, instead of this, right? Because it really is more than the protein.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's almost like, I think folks after bariatric surgery, like that marketing is so heavy towards them too. Like, oh, you can get this product, like you said, like protein chips. Now there's protein crackers. There's so many different things. And it's like, we think high protein is maybe the better option all the time. But I think too, just considering like, okay, what's the level of processing too? Because, as you were saying, like, yes, some of these things probably are slider foods, which aren't going to leave you quite as satisfied.
No. And it's really not going to do the same thing. I mean, I feel like you were with me, Kayla, the last time I was at Target, because I walked down the cereal aisle and all of a sudden they have all this protein cereal, Magic Spoon and whatever else, everything there. And I was like, oh, that looks so good. And it's high in protein. And I literally looked like an idiot in Target because I put it in my cart and I was like, no, it's not. And then I was in Target. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I did not make the $13 cereal purchase, but it was a real struggle for me to have that conversation with myself about whether or not I was going to do that. Because it's cereal and I want to have cereal and, oh, look, this has protein. But something in the back of my brain was like, yeah, it's not going to taste like what you think it's going to taste. And you're going to be hungry 30 minutes later. I was thinking that. I didn't know why I was thinking that.
Right.
But,
and then you might need a second mortgage, with all of the different protein products. They're expensive. Yeah.
Oh my God. They're so expensive. And I think literally that was the reason I put it back the first time. Because I walked down that aisle and I was like, ooh, grabbed it and then saw $13.99. And I was like, yeah, no. And then did the back and forth. But it is expensive. And it's the berry math that we do, oh, I need protein. I'm missing some foods that I used to enjoy or still do enjoy. Right. So I started doing this bargaining with myself of, well, I know that's not the best choice, but it's better than, I don't know, O's or Kicks or, you fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. So that math really does get you. But doing the downstream math, as my dad would say, would really help me make that decision, right? Because then the conversation becomes, is this really going to satisfy? Does this product have nutrients that my body's going to have to work to digest? Is it going to mess with my hormones? What is this going to do to my blood sugar? Those are actually questions that are much more beneficial for us in the long run than what we initially see with our eyes.
Yeah. And I think it's maybe overly simplistic to think that everybody's just going to get their protein from like chicken and fish and eggs and things like that. So I think it's certainly helpful and it's just nice to have that balance. Like maybe if you are going to have something that's more like a slider food, again, just pairing it with something that's got a little bit more roughage or something that's going to be a little bit more substantial.
Yes. Well, and again, it goes back to, we know that after surgery, we are going to have to do things differently. We have to live differently. But I really had this epiphany these last couple weeks. It's not that I'm learning to do brand new things. I'm learning how to do the things I already know how to do differently. And for whatever reason, that has helped lower the temperature on my own bariatric journey. And I know we're talking about this often in the Barination community. There is a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear, right? Before surgery and after surgery about like, oh my God, I have to learn to do absolutely everything all over again, or it's brand new and nothing is going to be the same. But now that I'm 5 years post-op, I'm really starting to realize, no, everything is the same, which is frustrating because you think it's going to be different and it's not. And you are having the same flipping conversations in Target with yourself that you would have had, before surgery. But for whatever reason, telling myself, no, April, you need to calm down. You are not learning something new. You are learning how to do something you already know how to do in a different way. I don't know why that has just allowed me to access this calmer part of myself. I guess it takes the pressure off of being perfect or not knowing what to do. And it also has opened up some new possibilities for me, because when I go and do something and I think, oh, this feels exactly the same. That's kind of my first like red flag. Like, oh, if this feels exactly the same, is this really beneficial for you after surgery? Or is this an area where you need to learn how to do this thing just differently? Right? It's a different approach for me. And I don't know why it's so impactful all of a sudden, but it is.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a big mindset shift, I think, too. Like, I had heard it on another podcast, I think, about how just like coming from a point of like taking better care of yourself versus feeling like I have to do things this way. And, I think a lot of times, Jim, just helping people realize like you've got to, for lack of a better term, you've got to learn how to eat like a normal person again, like eventually after surgery. And I think just finding what that looks like and, being comfortable with, like you said, like that mental aspect of it too. It's a lot of those mental barriers that you're kind of jumping as you go along.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that really struck me the other day is so in the Barination membership community, we have this Very Good Day checklist. So it's a virtual digital checklist, 10 things that ASMBS says we as patients need to do each and every day. So we can go to that checklist every day and, literally check things off as we get them done. And it was a crazy day. And I always end my day in the community in that checklist. I just do another pass through, and I got 7 out of the 10 things. I checked those off and I was like, cool, 70%. And my brain instantly was like, you done messed up. 70%. You are celebrating 70%. Like, what is wrong with you? You should only be celebrating if it's 100%. And it just caught me in my tracks because I couldn't believe that I was beating myself up over passing, right? Like when I was in college, let's be real. I got a D one time and I was like, D's get degrees. I am, like good, done. And here I am absolutely raking myself over the coals because I did 7 out of the 10 things right that day. And this little voice inside of me just said, God, it never feels as good as what you think it's going to feel like. Doing the right thing, making the good decision just doesn't hit the same. And I just thought, oh my God, April, you are so true. We have this thing. I have this thing built up in my head that when I do everything right, I'm going to feel amazing. It's going to feel great. But then I go and do those things and I still don't feel great. And
You're
it's
just
like,
stressed out about doing all of those things.
Yes. And I'm like holding myself to this big grand, like everything's going to be great and you're going to feel wonderful when you do it 100%. And it's like, sometimes it doesn't feel good to do the right thing. It just doesn't feel good. Not that it feels horrible, but it, doing the right thing sometimes just feels like, 70%. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. I mean, it was just this weird conversation that I was having with myself related to the thing, that I'm doing that is aligned to my journey. Why can't I just, be happy about that? And why do I have such a high expectation for the feeling that I'm going to have when I do it right? And when you were talking about the foods that we eat and why we choose to eat it, it's like, oh man, we can make all the right food decisions. It might not feel the way that we think it's going to feel, but it doesn't mean that it's not the best decision for us and for our health and for our wellness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. And I think too, I'll maybe add, I had a client tell me once, and I'll never forget it. She's like, if you wake up with 70% and you give all 70%, like you gave 100% for the day. Like some days you're going to wake up with 90% and you give all 90%. And, some days you might, fall short of whatever your 100% is. But I think just recognizing like not every day is going to be 100%.
No. Oh, and that's so powerful, right? It gives you it gives you the space and grace to give it your all each and every day, because your all is going to look very different. Oh my gosh. Well, as normal, these conversations go places that I never freaking think that they're going to go until they go there. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, Kayla, what's the one thing that you're hoping people are leaving this conversation with?
That's a good question. I feel like, again, we could go down lots of avenues. We've kind of crossed a few intersections today. But I think like just thinking about, like feeding yourself, I think, really kind of connecting with, whatever your food is, for example. So I think that, one thing that I've really recognized lately is trying to, like, we think like quick and convenient is always better. I think we're just kind of hardwired that way now. Like everything should be, fast and satisfying. And I think just even like taking a few moments to like maybe assess some of your food rules that you've got, like what we talked about today, or maybe assessing your relationship with even cooking or things like that, kind of romanticizing like meal prep again, or because it's not a bad thing to spend time in your kitchen, for example. I think it's like we think if a meal is going to take more than 20 minutes, why bother? Or, that it's, make it a family affair, like light some candles, listen to a podcast, or, it's not bad to spend time in the kitchen. And when you're, putting that work into your plate, I think you have, again, like some of those physical rewards, like we talked about, you get some of those hormonal benefits, but then you also feel satisfied. You're proud of the work that you put in. So I think just not looking as things like cooking or meal prep or feeding yourself, like that's a form of self-care. And if you are kind of pouring back into yourself, I think ultimately that's really going to show in the long run.
Agreed. And I'm certainly leaving this conversation with so many more tools that I can tap into when I am making a decision about what I'm choosing to eat and why I'm choosing to eat it. I enjoy Cheetos like the rest of us. I enjoy, I'm not going to stop enjoying those things, but I certainly have a different perspective on why I choose to enjoy those foods and probably when. I feel like I've been so successful along this journey because I'm able to have conversations with you and other experts. And if you're listening and you're watching this episode, you are doing the same thing too. This is literally how you do the things that you already know how to do differently. We all know how to eat, but we are learning to eat differently. And our why for the choices that we make can be different as well. So it doesn't just have to stop at that physicality. It stops with the reasons that are driving all of these things. So I very much appreciate it. And yeah, I just feel more empowered to continue to make the decisions that I'm already making. And it's really going to help me make some different decisions in the future. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Dang, that question came in for the community and I was like, okay, I gotta ask. We got tons of experts. The other thing I want to say too, if you're listening and you're watching this podcast and something has sparked a follow-up question, you're like, okay, April didn't ask this, or I would have really liked to ask Kayla this. There's a couple of options for you here. On Spotify, you guys can go and leave a comment on each individual episode. So go to Spotify or listen to this episode there on that channel and then comment on the episode and we'll see it. And I can pass that question on to Kayla. Maybe she'll even join us again for a podcast episode where we can answer your question. The other opportunity that you have, Kayla is an expert in the Barination membership community. She leads monthly Q&As and she teaches classes in the community. In fact, the one that you have coming up in December, it's a macros master class, correct?
Yes, macros masterclass. And so we do a crash course on macros and kind of what that looks like throughout the journey after surgery, like how you can expect your plate to change. But then I can't help myself. I have to like throw in some blood sugar stuff too. So we talk about how the different macronutrients impact your blood sugar, how things like grazing and slider foods, like some of those things that we talked about today, we dive a little bit deeper too.
It's a phenomenal class. I've actually taken it and I've gone to several of Kayla's Q&As, which is a phenomenal opportunity for you to pop into a Zoom, ask your question and get feedback in the moment. And the really awesome kind of 1-2 punch that we were talking about on this episode also happens in Barination. So you can go to one of Kayla's classes, learn about the science behind your hunger, right? Eating and all that kind of stuff. And then you can hop into a support group that's led by a bariatric therapist. So if you are struggling with bariatric eating, you need that nutritional support, but you also might need that mindset support, right? So that's when you can attend a group that's led by Laura Grabo on emotional eating or life and maintenance. You can go to a general support by Christy Delora. You can go to a coping skills class led by Katie Booker. You can go to an addiction transfer support group led by Sarah Smith, who is an addiction therapist. So, we all recognize that this bariatric life, the eating that we do, the things that we are learning to do differently involves approaching it from multiple facets. And in Barination, you can really find that. You can get that expert support in those other areas and bring them all together in your own life. It's a really powerful piece. And I think that's why I've been successful. I think it's why many people, hundreds, thousands of people have been successful, is because they're able to tap into that in the community. So I just needed to shout that out. Kayla is also available to work one-on-one with. She has her own community that hyper-focuses on blood sugar as well. You really do all the things, my friend. You are everywhere, on all the places.
Yes.
But you got to do what you got to do to support people. So if you are interested in working with Kayla, you want to know more about her community, you want to know more about Barination, or you have that follow-up question that you would love us to address, you guys go to Spotify, go to barination.mn.co, click the links, follow Kayla on Instagram and all the places, because it really does take a village. It takes time and practice and energy and curiosity and all of the things that you're showing just by listening or watching to this episode. So know that all of those resources are available for you if and when you are ready. Kayla, maybe quickly on Instagram, or where can people follow you on Instagram, or where can they find you on the web?
Yes, I'm at Kayla Girgen RD on all the things.
All the things.
All the things.
She's also a rucking expert, FYI. So if you have been curious about rucking, weighted walking, Kayla is your guru for that. She's freaking amazing. I think we have 1 or 2 of your rucking classes in our on-demand library too, in the Barination.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's quite the thing. It's quite the thing. All right, Kayla. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was amazing. We appreciate you, and we can't wait to keep learning from you on this show and in the community.
Thank you.
Bye. That wraps up another empowering episode of the Barination Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, keep the conversation going by joining the Barination membership community, where you can attend live support events, access on-demand resources, and find a caring community.
Join us at barination.mn.co. If you found this podcast valuable, help us produce it by becoming a $5 monthly supporter at barinationpodcast.com.
And just remember, at the end of the day, you've got this, we've got you, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.